Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to the Mel Blackwell Experience on this August 17th, the year of our Lord, 2025. I want to get going today with one of our favorites on this program, which is Ronald Reagan.
We are a nation that has a government, not the other way around. And this makes us special among the nations of the earth. Our government has no power except that granted it by the people. Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. All of us need to be reminded that the federal government did not create the states. The states created the federal government. From time to time, we've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule, that government by an elite group is superior to government for, by, and of the people. Well, if no one among us is capable of governing himself, then who among us has the capacity to govern someone else? All of us together, in and out of government, must bear the burden. The solutions we seek must be equitable, with no one group singled out to pay a higher price. We hear much of special interest groups. Well, our concern must be for a special interest group that has been too long neglected. It knows no sectional boundaries or ethnic and racial divisions, and it crosses political party lines. It is made up of men and women who raise our food, patrol our streets, man our mines and factories, teach our children, keep our homes, and heal us when we're sick. Professionals, industrialists, shopkeepers, clerks, cabbies, and truck drivers. They are, in short, we the people. It's not my intention to do away with government. It is rather to make it work. Work with us, not over us. To stand by our side, not ride on our back. Government can and must provide opportunity, not smother it. Foster productivity, not stifle it. If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. It is no coincidence that our present troubles parallel and are proportionate to the intervention and intrusion in our lives that result from unnecessary and excessive growth of government. It is time for us to realize that we're too great a nation to limit ourselves to small dreams. Let us begin an era of national renewal. Let us renew our determination, our courage, and our strength. And let us renew our faith and our hope. We must act today in order to preserve tomorrow. We, as Americans, have the capacity now, as we've had in the past, to do whatever needs to be done to preserve this last and greatest bastion of freedom. We're not, as some would have us believe, doomed to an inevitable decline. I do not believe in a fate that will fall on us no matter what we do. I do believe in a fate that will fall on us if we do nothing.
Wow. Well, a lot of us are old enough to remember when Ronald Reagan was running for president, how demonized he was. They went after him with the same kind of vitriol they do Trump. And, he was called, stupid and old and tired and the 9-to-5 president, White House and all these kinds of things. And then he dies and they, Donaldson, all those guys get up with a fake tear in their eye and talk about how great Reagan is. And so then now we've talked about a lot of things these past 14 podcasts. This is number 15. How about that? And the main thing I want to bring to light today is just remember the truth about how Reagan was treated while he was trying to do these things. and don't listen to what people say about him now, where they put on their Pollyanna rose-colored glasses and they like to talk about him and say, well, he had so much more decorum than candidate A or B or Trump or whoever. And so some things he said there that were fascinating. Reagan had these longstanding beliefs from the 60s, where if you haven't seen his speeches to General Electric as he traveled around kind of making the transition from actor to acting guild leader to out perfecting his thought processes and speeches with, face to face with Americans, speaking in GE locations around or speeches around the country. And, he was definitely a small government, basically a federalist, somebody who believed in states' rights, understood the Constitution, and he saw the ever-creeping scope and size of the federal government as a threat to our republic. And so he said some things, large government, the larger the government, the less the opportunity for the citizens, and particularly the federal government. He said that the states created the federal government, not the other way around. Our rights, of course, come from God, not from government. And then one of the fascinating things he said is he brought this concept up of a new special interest group. And remember, this is in the 1980s, okay, coming out of the 70s into the 80s, that the new special interest group was basically American citizens. Does that sound? I wish we could make that today, right? So he said it didn't matter what color or creed or stripe or religion or part of the country they lived in. It was just the hardworking Americans, the people that just want to get government off their back. And so in that vein, there's been no president, I don't believe, in at least modern history of the United States that I've studied, that's done as much as Donald Trump has done to get the federal government off the back of the people. And it was wild because he followed Obama, so there was 8 years of big government stuff, then followed by Trump for 4 years, and they really went after him. And we'll talk a little bit about Russia, and all that stuff. But it's so prevalent in the news, you don't need to hear me regurgitate it. Just keep an eye on it and listen to the reliable news sources, and basically just read for yourself. It's pretty easy to see what was going on, but. Reagan didn't really shrink the size of government as much as he wanted to because he got into that D.C. machine and he was fighting the swamp. And Reagan was brilliant because he was hedgehog. He was the one thing that he was most dedicated to was strengthening the American people, trying to increase the standing of all 50 states and all the people that lived in them, but also defeating the enemy of the time, what he called the evil empire, which was the Soviet Union. And so he, sometimes you have such a large task to do that you cannot get around to some of the other things. You just can't. And the swamp made sure of it. So even though he did a lot to deregulate, he did a lot to revise tax structure. I mean, Reagan was a fantastic president. But in terms of just creating the 25 pages of stuff that one would want to do if they were a constitutional, republic, conservative, Christian that wanted to really be loyal to the constituents of the American citizens and say, instill patriotism, instill education, not sell out our citizens and our country and our economics and our businesses and our land and our universities and, our churches and our pulpits to a bunch of global God haters. And so Trump has done some amazing stuff there. It's been incredible to see. But we'll talk today a little bit. We're going to get into business best practice, to something that's fascinating for me, and I hope you find it fascinating. I'll talk about that next, and then we'll get into just some of the current events. But this is Jordan Peterson talking about something that leads us into this business best practice.
I often teach people to negotiate for their salaries. It's like, okay, you're negotiating for a new job, you're negotiating for a raise. What should you ask for? That's easy. Figure out how much you'd have to be paid so that you were thrilled to have the job. And then tell the person, look, you got to be reasonable about it. Right. It's got to be within the bounds of sensibility, But you might think, okay, well, I need to be able to get up in the morning and think, God, it's so good that I get to go do this job. It's like, okay, how much do you have to be paid to do that?
Mm-hmm. So he makes it sound very easy. I'll tell you a real story about me. It's a very good point. As usual, Jordan Peterson's spot on. But try that on. I mean, it depends on who you're negotiating with, right? So this business best practice will be on negotiation. It'll be something that I was taught by an angel, believe it or not. And don't lose me. I hadn't lost my mind. I'll tell you the story. You decide for yourself. But I was having to. I'd been through the 5th merger, I believe, when I was at USA Mobile. And if you remember from past podcasts, we were buying companies, and then all of a sudden we were bought. When we were purchased, it was a paradigm shift. It wasn't right or wrong. It was simply the way you did it. So at USA Mobile, the Stan Sek, those guys, brilliant guys, had come up with the end game and had a strategy where it was the valuation of the business would be based on the number of pagers in service. This was a paging business. So pagers were cool. I mean, we made them cool. And so I was riding that wave of pushing USA Mobile brand, copy-paste, further south, working for great people who I've mentioned on this podcast. But all of a sudden, they're all gone. I find myself out there. You know, I have learned the language. I have unified. So like with the Tower of Babel, I mean, I had gotten it down. I was able to preach the USA Mobile vision. It was just innate in the way I operated. We had great systems in place. We had awesome communications. And then all of a sudden, the phone rings and it's like, hey, I just want to let you know this is confidential, but we've sold the business to Arch Wireless out of Massachusetts. And I'm like, okay, well, cool. Well, surely they'll want to do everything exactly the way that we do it. And, all my bosses bailed. They made a bunch of money and left, and I'm out there on the edge of the universe. And now I don't represent the DNA that is looked after. Now, there were certain best practices that they obviously embraced. Totally different culture change. And more important than that, different people that did not know me, could not understand, anything about me until they talked to me and met me. And so it was tough. And so my new boss was positioned in Charlotte, North Carolina. He was very accounting and finance background. And today that wouldn't be such a issue for me because I've been versed and skilled in that. That wasn't my education in college, and that dang sure wasn't my strength in the mid 1990s because I was managing a P&L and I was working for really sharp people, but my skill set was Pied Piping, excellent at hiring. I'd learned to manage the culture. I'd learned to get a team in place and really get them pulling together. But when somebody would come in and really start challenging, digging into different areas and strategies and things that people understood better than me at that time, who had come out of the investment banking world or were really solid finance, had a lot of years in business and could understand the tricks of the trade in and around a P&L. Yeah, I mean, I had a lot to learn. And so he kind of looked down his nose at me, and I didn't like that. I really didn't like that. And it got back to me, that this new boss of mine was, taking more of a shine to the people that were of his similar background from education and experience. And so I took it on as a challenge. And so me and my great wisdom, I decided to push on him for it was time for me to get a raise. And it was, to be honest, because we were paid a relatively low base and a real high upside, and we made good money. But in this model, I was actually underpaid because the upside was cut way back. It was not going to be a growth model. So USA Mobile sells its business based on the number of pagers in service. Arch comes in and has a totally different model of it's going to be a cash flow focus, but also what they termed free cash flow on pager transactions. And I'm like, at first I'm like, whatever. But it was actually really smart. It was to try to make sure, because imagine in a business where you're going to get paid a premium for the number of units you have in service. Wow, you can get real aggressive on how cheap you sell them or lease them because you're going to get a premium on number of units in service. Well, whoever buys that has to go, hey, we have all these units in service. We need to make sure they're profitable. And so in that model, we were putting out leasing a pager, for instance, and by the time the lease ended, we hadn't even paid for the pager in some instances. So it was very smart. And I got it, and I was like, that's good. So long story longer, I decided I need to go see my new boss. And so I talked to him on the phone, and he just whipped me. He just was like, I said, think that I really like to talk to you about my salary. And his response was brutal. He was just like, well, honestly, Mel, I can go get any number of people that can do just as good a job as you that would take the salary you have. I mean, what do you say back to that, And so I did a little research. So this is what I found out about my boss. Harvard grad. He was the captain of the debate team at Harvard. And I'm like, dang, no wonder he ate my lunch. I mean, this guy was smart. And I actually became good friends with him and a lot of respect for him. And he came around to respect me. But let me tell you the story, how that happened, because it's fascinating. And so he takes me to the cleaners over the phone. And he wasn't rude, but he basically showed me that I was not prepared to come have this conversation. And if you wanted to go toe-to-toe with this man, you needed to know your stuff. And he wanted me to understand I'm in charge and I have a model that we're going to follow. I really don't think you're worth any more money than we pay you. And until you do what you're, supposed to do for me, I may not even want you around. I'm like, whoa. I was like, holy cow. I was like, so being the relentless soul I am, I said, okay, well, fine. I want to fly up to meet with you. And that's how I concluded that conversation. And I think it shocked him because I don't think he was thinking that I was going to charge. And I did that out of pure instinct. It was the dumbest thing for me to do because I'm like, man, now I got to go sit down in front of him. Now he's going to smile at me while he eats me. And he said, sure, come on up. And so I flew up there, and the truth be known, I was totally unprepared. I mean, I was totally unprepared for this meeting. So I fly into Charlotte, North Carolina. I rent my car, and then I go to the hotel. Right next to the hotel was a Landry Seafood. And so I thought, well, I'll swing in here and get me some crab legs or something before I go take this beating. And this is fascinating. So I drive up in the parking lot, and it's really interesting that what I remember distinctly. It had been slightly rainy, so it had that really nice smell of rain on like concrete. And I get out of my rental car, and something catches my attention. It's like a cold breeze because it's not cold outside, okay? But it's like, whoo, like a chill. And I look over to the right, and there's this, relatively, I would say, I'm in my late 20s. This person's probably in their 40s. Relatively indescript, kind of a fair complexion, sandy red hair, and he's in a white, what looked like a construction truck with a logo on the truck. I don't remember what it said. I wish I did. And he gets out of the truck, and it may not have had a logo, but it had something on it, right? And so he gets out of the truck, and it was weird because I travel as a bit of a loner, I don't mind sitting by myself and eating. I don't mind sitting on an airplane not talking. I mean, I love that kind of alone time, and I'll read or whatever or ponder. And so he as we're kind of awkwardly bump into each other to walk in the door, and he opens the door for me. And I just remember looking at him, and it was a very strange feeling that I had, like, And he made eye contact, and he said, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm good, good. How are you?" So we step in the door, and at that time, I don't know if Landry's is even around anymore, but they had the little welcome person right there at the thing, and she says, "Table for two." And that's 100% no for me. Prior to that or after, I'm just be like, no, I'm not sitting with some stranger, especially not some strange dude, right? And so I'm like, I looked over at him, and we both said, sure. And it was not, that was just, and even while I'm walking over there, I'm like, what the heck? Why'd I say sure? So we walk in. If you remember how Landry's was at that time, you would walk in, and then you would go to the right, and there's this long shotgun bar. It's probably 75 to 100 feet down that maybe not that far, 50 to 60 feet down. And all the booths are to the right, and you have to step up. So you have this long row of probably 15 booths to the right next to the window. And then you have this long like corridor. And then on the other side, adjacent from the windows, there is the bar, long bar. And so we go down almost to the end. And I was walking first, so I walked always to the second to the end seat. We sit down. I have my back to the door. That's not the Italian thing to do, right? But I have my back to the door, and he has his face to the door. So he's looking down that long corridor, and I have my back to it. All I can see is him and the one booth and the wall. So we sit there, and I was I was very perplexed as I'm like, man, I just do not know. And it's weird because I don't think anybody else would have known. I'm good at hiding stuff like that. And he, after a little bit, hey, what do you do? And I do this. And when I asked him what he did, he told me he was a carpenter. And I said, oh, good, and I didn't ask any more questions, And I said, well, I asked him if he was, local or whatever. He said, no, he's just passing through. Of course, I didn't ask him where he's from or anything. And so we're sitting there. I'm kind of perplexed and I'm self-absorbed. And he says, what's on your mind? I said, well, I'm here to meet with my boss. And, he's the freaking Harvard grad. He was the captain of the debate team. He really is. I mean, I'm just telling y'all, in the world of smart, this guy's, top 5 people I've ever met probably. And he wasn't a bad person at all, but he didn't give you any mercy for coming in and trying to challenge him unless you had your act together. And he was also a wrestler. So he was like a wrestling champ. So you put all that together and it's like, Mel, you're an idiot for even going up there. Just keep your job. And so I'm sitting there with this nice stranger, and he looks at me and he asked me some questions, and he says, okay. And he says, so what is it that you're hoping to get? And I told him I felt like I was underpaid. And he looked at me, he said, have you ever heard of the razor? And I said, no, I haven't heard of the razor. And we'll be honest with y'all, to this day, I've never seen or heard anything about the razor except from this stranger. And so now since that time, I've talked about it and I've trademarked it for me to use. But I said, no, I have not heard of the razor. And I was kind of in that mode where almost, if I could have gotten up to pee, I probably would have just fled and just left homeboy just sitting there. But I just had that, I was on the edge of, this guy's about to give me gold, and I was on the edge walking out. I mean, and sometimes that's the way God works with us, is right before you just give up or you flee or you chicken out, But I didn't. I stayed there, and, he said, he took his napkin, because back then, everything, a paper napkin and a pen, and I mean, many businesses have been formed that way. And he draws like a pyramid, a triangle, with the base at the bottom and the tip at the top. And he says, this is the razor. And he looked at me. He said, I will share this with you if you promise to use it for good. And he said, and I believe that using it for yourself qualifies for that. I will share this. You go use it, but only use it for good. And I just looked at him, and I was like, sure, man. Absolutely. In a minute. I'm like, okay, I get it. So he sits down and he shows me the razor, and I won't go through it in complete because I do have a blog post about the razor. And let me see what it's called here. It's called The Razor Improve Your Debate Skills Tenfold. Something like that. I put 10 different versions of it out on my thing. But this guy, he sits there and he goes through it, and he says, this is very, very simple, very powerful, but it's not easy because you don't think this way. And he said, when you're in a debate of any kind where you're going in and you have to represent your points against counterpoints, and then they're going to point and you have to counterpoint. He said, what you're going to fight is emotion. You're going to fight confusion. You're going to fight getting off task. You're going to be like squirrel, and you're going to go down a path like, why did I do that? And he said, so the number one thing about the razor is discipline. The second thing about the razor is the shorter and more concise your points are, because there's 3 points. You have a point at the tip, and that's your lead point. And then you have 2 base points. So 1, 2, and 3. 1 is the tip. 2 is the bottom left. If you're looking at it, the bottom left point, and then the far right point is the tip is point 3. So 1 at the top, 2 at the bottom left, 3 at the bottom right. It's that simple. And they can't be paragraphs. And so they have to be the shorter and more concise the statement you have. And he said, so you'll have to practice this tonight. But if you'll take this and you'll practice and you'll stick to it when you go in there tomorrow, he said, I give you my word, you will at least tie him as good as he is at what he does. He's gotten you challenged him to his home office, in his office, after he whipped you, face to face, and if you tie him, he will respect you. And I said, okay. And so we sat there, we went through, let me finish this story, and then I'll go into the razor a little bit more. So we're sitting there. We ate. I can remember not having a great appetite. And so it wasn't like, 2 big steak dinners. We just ate like some chicken or whatever you can get, or fish, whatever you can get at Landry's. And we were sitting there, and I said to him, I said, look, the least I can do is buy you dinner. And of course I was going to put it on the company too, because I'm traveling. So it's like, we'll let him pay for it, my boss. And so I'm like, we're out, let me buy you, dinner or whatever. And he said, sure. And so I get up and I turn my back to the table, and I'm talking about, but as I lose him in my right eye, as I turn to the left, and remember, it's a long hallway. We're sitting against the window. All you got to do is walk directly like 15 feet and you're at the bar. Maybe even less than that, 12 feet, you're at the bar. You have to step down off of, because it's a raised, I hate those too, right? You got the booth with a raised step up so that everybody can fall off there when they try to walk out. And so I turn to the left. I get that same cold breeze that comes right through me. I mean, it went all the way through me. And that's how it was outside. But at least outside, I'm like, well, maybe it was a breeze. In here, it didn't make any sense. Okay. And dude was gone. He disappeared on me. And there's no way that he can get, because it is a long walk. Remember, we sat all the way down at the end. There's at least 15 booths. And we're down in the second to the last booth. It is a long walk. I don't care if he's Harvey Nance, Bo Jackson, Herschel Walker, doesn't matter. Usain Bolt couldn't have gotten from that table out of my sight. And so I'm going to go through this again. I'm sitting at the table with him, right? I have my back to the restaurant, and I'm looking at him. He's looking all the way down that walkway. I get up, I shake his hand, and I say, hey, I'm going to get the tip. So I walk over to the bar, because the bartender had been waiting on us. And I walk over there with the check. And before I even get down that step, and I turn my head where I can't see him. I mean, he would have had to run over me to get past me. He disappeared. And it went like like that kind of chill that goes all the way through you. And you just are like, what in the world? And so I turned around, and the bartender was not facing us. He was facing the other way. And I looked at him. I said, hey, man, did you just see that guy disappear? And he's like, well, I just looked over there and saw y'all there. He said, but I've been over here working on some stuff. I said, okay. So I said, hold on a minute. I walked down to the nice lady that's the hostess. I had to walk past her. He had to go about 70 feet and then walk past her and go out in the parking lot. And I said, hey, and it wasn't very crowded at all. There was I don't think there was anybody in there but us on that side. And I said, did you see the gentleman I was eating with? And she's like, no. So I looked out in the parking lot, and the truck was gone. And I'm like, because he'd parked right next to me. Is that crazy? And so I did. I was just like, I think I just had dinner with an angel that gave me godly technology called the razor. And so I said, all right. Then I was like kind of enthralled and thrilled. And, I was like, I guess I need to go try to figure this out, right? So I just shifted out of that, and I went home, went back to the hotel, and I sat down with I had I wish I'd have kept it. I wish I'd have remembered his name, because I'm horrible with names. I've gotten better, but I have to try. And then I wish I would have kept the napkin, because he actually drew the razor on a napkin, and he actually put a couple of points. And so it took, I'll be honest with you guys, I wasn't very good at it. I sat there and it took forever. I mean, my first point was like, dadgummit, I've been working here for all these years, and I have 5 different mergers, and my bosses thought I was great. And you know what I mean? I'm like, okay, that can't be the tip of the razor. I've got to get this thing down to something more concise. And so I did. So let me finish the story of how I dealt with my boss. So I do my razor as best I could. A lot better at it now than I was then. Okay. Still too long-winded. I go in there, I sit down with my boss, and he tried. He played some tricks on me, all right? So we go in there, we sit down, and he puts the burden on me. He's like, okay, so, he didn't say things like, hey, I'm in a hurry, I don't have much time for you. When I got there, he gave me a tour of the whole office. He treated me like a VIP. Went in, showed me his office. He got to look at all of his trophies from debate team, all of his wrestling trophies, his degrees from Harvard. And I'm just sitting there going, man, I am one idiot, but at least I've got the redheaded angel that might help me out here. And so I had confidence. I've had butterflies. I felt like puking. And I sit across from him, and he says, all right, so you called this meeting. He said, what's on your mind? And I can't remember my razor, but I just went tip one. So the way the razor works is you play your strongest point first. No matter what he says, you play one of your 2 base points. Okay? So I have point 1, 2, and 3. I lead with 1. If he says Scooby-Doo, I go with either 2 or 3. It doesn't matter what he says. And then he says Scooby-Doo in the smoot, and I go point 3. And then if he says something else, I go point 1. And what you do is you play your points relentlessly, and you slice that person up. And it worked. And I was like, I cannot believe this. I went toe-to-toe with this cat. And I honestly probably didn't even have that great of a point. I sincerely think he probably was more correct than me. It just came down to this is my livelihood, and I needed more money, And so I knew things were working when he called for a break. He said, you know what, let's take a break. Let's go ahead. We'll eat a little bit early. So we go, and he gets some sandwiches brought in or whatever, and we sit there and eat. And then we're about halfway done eating, and he comes in at me again, and I played it again on him. And he just looked at me. And this went on for maybe 30 or 40 minutes, and then a lunch, and another 30 or 40 minutes. And then he just kind of stood up, and he said, look, I'll be quite honest with you. One of my biggest concerns with you is that you're basically strong sales and marketing background, and in this company you're going to have a much stronger accounting, finance background. I said, how do you know that? I'm like, what are you basing that on? And he's like, well, that's a good point. And he said, look, let's just agree to stalemate on this whole conversation. And he said, let me think about this. And before I left, we kind of did some more niceties and walked around. He kind of pulled me aside, and he looked at me kind of fatherly, and he sort of kind of put his arm on my shoulder, his hand on my shoulder in an affectionate way, and gave me a little shake, and just said, you're an impressive young man. I underestimated you. And I said, thank you. I said, obviously you're an impressive man, and I didn't underestimate you. I just don't want to work here. And I just told him what was bothering me the most was I lost all my mentors, and I didn't know that he really wanted to mentor me. That I just, and that some of the things he had said had made me feel like that I was somebody else's dog. He didn't want me in the camp. And we parted ways with a legitimate handshake, and he became an incredibly good boss. And I didn't work there that much longer because I didn't want to. It's not him. I just didn't want to be a part of shrinking. I was the growth guy. I was going to grow the business. Everything was going to be great. We were going to take USA Mobile to freaking Mexico, and it was over. And to take the business, and that business shrunk back. It just continued to shrink. And I remember my last call with him. I just said, I can't shrink businesses for a living at this stage of my career. I want to go grow. And he said, you're right, and you should, and you're good at it. But it was awesome, and I got my raise. I got about 50% raise on my base, and it was fantastic. And so people have their different, angel stories or whatever, but there's no doubt in my mind that was an angel. Things about him that were fascinating. My granddad on my mom's side, they called him, his name was Red Mosley, Moseley. And Granddaddy Red is who he was to me, but everybody else called him Red Mosley. And Red was good friends with Jerry Clower. And I don't know if you guys remember Jerry Clower, but Granddaddy flew a lot. He basically built Bluebird busing out of Fort Valley, Georgia, all over the world, and took it from, number 3 or number 4 in the world to number 1. And he was incredibly talented on the sales, marketing, relationship side. He was just really good. And he could do that in various countries around language barriers, and he knew his stuff. But I didn't think about this until the other day, and I was thinking about this guy sure did look like a young version of Granddaddy Red. And, of course, I didn't ever see Granddaddy Red when he was young because he was my granddad. I saw pictures, but they're black and white. And I've thought to myself, I'm like, I really do. It was fascinating how I didn't even think this person was an angel until they disappeared right in front of me and passed right through me with this cold, can't describe it. Doesn't make any sense. Never felt it before or after that. And so just really interesting how things can work and God works. But go check out on my blog, go check out The Razor. It's a debate tactic. And so I'm going to run through it again real quick. And so you conceive 3 really solid points simplified into short sentences. You have to be disciplined and then you state and restate those 3 points in a circular reinforcing manner without sounding like a broken record or a politician. So you might word it differently, but it's those 3 things. And you never go squirrel. You never get emotional. You never get upset. You just stay on those things. So it's a tenacious and relentless circular discussion. Okay. Now, the better the points, the better your argument, but it works. And so I've used the razor. I've taught the razor. And I had, like I said, for years, I was like, I'm just going to see, does this thing exist out there? So why did this dude, where did he get it? And I sincerely believe that that was a technology that, as simple as it is, was given to me to help me. And once I learned that it worked, I was supposed to use it to help others, and I have. All right. So one of the other things that's interesting, people have asked me, I appreciate, I get some criticism on the podcast because I'm me and I do things, but mostly love, and mostly I've gotten some things that just really warm my heart. But it has been asked, how do I prepare for the podcast? And it is interesting. I think a lot. I'm okay with things in my head. I have a whiteboard in my head, and I don't mind that things kind of staying up in there and organized. And, I don't spend a lot of time storyboarding this out. The most organized part of it is I will look for clips, and these clips I play, I will find those. I collect them all week. And then usually the day of the podcast, I take about an hour to organize the board. So I have a board where I can store these clips, and then I can just click through them, and that way I can, hopefully it's smooth, but I make mistakes because it's just me. But it's pretty much a day of thing, and I don't have any script at all with what I'm saying. I might read something from an article I'm referencing, but it's all pretty much coming straight out of my head on the day of. But this is a fascinating clip that was sent to me, and it was sent through Gwen and me from Night Sauls. Very, very sharp lady. And we're like-minded on a lot of the things of God and politics and such. But she had sent this with Nick Freitas, and this is a really good clip. So check this out, and we'll talk about it.
Why do you think that communists and socialists keep trying to implement these systems into countries even when they keep failing time and time again? Is it just because they want power, or they're actually seeking that perfect utopia, or what?
C.S. Lewis says that it might actually be better to live under greedy robber barons than it is perpetual moral busybodies. He goes, the robber baron, the person that is motivated by greed or a lust for power, they may at some point have that desire satiated. He goes, but the person that torments you for your own good will do so without end because they do it with the approval of their own conscience. When I read Gramsci, when I read Herbert Marcuse, when I read Foucault, when I read Simone de Beauvoir, there seems to be a common trend, a disdain for God because God represents a power and authority outside of themselves, a disdain for objective reality because God makes objective reality possible. And then there's no objective morality. So if you're rebelling against reality itself and your goal is to be your own God, you can come up with 1,000 different ways to justify whatever you're doing, to include what you're doing to other people. And if they're the ones standing in the way of this great utopia that we're going to create because they haven't fully embraced the ideas the way they should, well then we'll be happy to re-educate them or imprison them or enslave them or kill them because ultimately they're the ones standing in the way of utopia.
Mm-hmm. Is that good or what? I had not followed him. Now I do. So thank you, Knight. All right, let's talk about that. So he's spot on. I mean, he's really spot on. So this is it looked to be young college age girl that asked the question. And, it is interesting. And we've talked about this before. These people that latch on to, number one, they're power hungry. Number two, they seek to rule over us. And number three, they're going to save us from ourselves, or they're going to save us from some imminent threat to mankind. And they're full of crap is what they are. And what we have to do is we talked a lot last week about where wisdom comes from. It comes from God. For your ability to see, well, that comes from God. And God can blind you, and the devil spends his entire existence blinding you, deceiving you, lying to you, getting you to go way off course. And I think one of the ways that you attack this whole communist, whatever it is that they're trying to do, right? And it's easy to see who they are, the Mamdani people of the world. And you see now everybody aligning behind him with his perfectly trimmed beard, that he's always they're trying to put him up now as something that he's not. And the only way he could ever get elected is to convince you that he didn't mean what he said. But he does. He means a lot more than he says for harm. But these people are deceivers and they're liars. And anybody that comes into things with a communist model is going to destroy whatever it is they take over. It's the truth. So I don't know if you guys have ever read, and I recommend you do it. It's not a hard read. It's a scary read. It's Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. He wrote it in 1971. So it was written coming out of the 60s in the early 70s. And if you remember when we talked about Reagan opening up the program, I mean, Reagan was coming into power to be the president. He had been the governor in California. He had been on the tour with GE. He had perfected his stump. And then he ran for president twice, and he lost the first one, and he made it the second time to replace Carter. Well, he was facing this kind of stuff, okay? But Rules for Radicals, just in some things. So I'm going to run through a couple of things. Power is key. These are points that Saul Alinsky makes. The whole thing is, take this book at face value. Rules for Radicals. These are rules. This is a how-to list for how radical people can take over America. Okay? Now it works. It's a universal truth. It'll work in any country. But the rules for radicals are to overthrow the current Republic of America. Okay? And so power is key. And he says power is derived from two main sources, money and people. And so this is where the whole organizer, community organizer. Organizers must leverage the collective strength of the people to challenge existing power structures. Okay? Number 2 point, work within the system. Effective change comes from understanding and using the existing system's rules and institutions rather than outright rejecting them. So when he says using, you take them over, you bastardize them, then you change. So you deceive. You work within the system. You get yourself positioned, you get yourself elected, you get yourself appointed, and you go in and you lie to folks, and then once you're in charge, you do what you want to do. You make radical change. Make the enemy react. 3rd point. Force opponents to respond to your actions, putting them on the defensive and exposing their weakness. This is where the razor plays. I've debated these kind of cats before, and they've walked off frustrated because part of what they do is try to get you on the defensive. They accuse you of what they're doing. And they're good at it. They're really good at it. They're a lot better at this stuff than we are fighting it. But number 4, keep the pressure on. Maintain constant pressure through varied and unpredictable tactics to wear down the opposition and sustain momentum. So that's pretty cool. Two things in a fight. You want to wear the other guy down, and you want to sustain your momentum. So as the other guy's losing and fading, you're hanging at least as strong as you were, right? So, I mean, this is effective stuff. Use clear, relatable issues. Frame issues in ways that resonate with people's experiences and values to build broad support, okay? They basically hijack things like, we need to have cheaper grocery prices, so let's implement communism, which makes things worse. They just don't say that last part. They get you to choose them because of a problem you have. And they're the ones that made the problem, and they're going to make that problem worse. Personalize the conflict. Focus on a specific individual or symbol of the opposition to humanize and simplify the struggle, avoiding abstract arguments. All right, what's Mondami doing now? He's running against Trump. It's not communism versus American exceptionalism. It's good old sweet, trim-bearded, nice little old Mondami against Mino Orange Man, right? So they're going to frame that. This is right out of Rules for Radical. Personalize the conflict, low blow, and try to demonize somebody. They're going to go after some specific people. Next point, stay flexible with tactics. Tactics must be adaptable, creative, and context specific. Use whatever works to achieve the goal. And when you read this book, you come to the conclusion, man, they'll do anything. Right and wrong doesn't exist in this world. It's effective, and that's all they care about. The next one, moralize the cause. Present your cause as morally right, but avoid rigid ideology. Pragmatism trumps dogma in achieving results. That's what he says, right? So you're going to go out and hijack a cause. It doesn't matter whether you really care about that cause. It doesn't matter in the end if you hate the cause, and you're going to destroy it. You hijack it, and you present it, and you moralize it, and now you've already demonized the other guy, so now you're trying to take the moral high ground. Next point, build organization. Create strong, sustainable organizations by empowering local leaders and fostering community ownership of the struggle. And so think of the non-government organizations, NGOs that are scattered all over this country and all over the world to achieve ill-gotten, horrible things into the Western society, where you're bringing, and it's not good to the people they're dragging across, 2 continents through hell and drug cartels to come up here for a promise that it's not promised by the American people. It's a bastardized promise. But they are organized, man. They are organized. And you can see where you've even got immigrants coming in from Hamas into America right now, getting positioned all over the country. And it's happening under Trump's administration, because it's the same thing that happened to Reagan. If you look at Reagan, he was as committed to small government as anybody in the world, and he struggled to implement it, even though he did drastically improve the economy and drastically improve a lot of things. He wasn't really able to in any major way shrink the government. Now, he did knock out a bunch of regulation, and he did crank up things. So don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking him. It's this deep state. It's the deep state that was so effective against Reagan. The people were behind Reagan big time, and he did an amazing job. But even he struggled to shrink government. All right, so then the next point, use ridicule and humor. Ridicule is a potent weapon to undermine the authority of opponents, as it's hard for them to counter without looking foolish. And then you use humor. Hey, look, Trump's good at some of this stuff too. Pick achievable wins. Focus on a winnable concrete goal to build confidence and momentum. And then engage the middle class. The middle class is critical for change. Their involvement lends legitimacy and resources to the movement. So think about that. So Ronald Reagan was literally saying in there that he's got a whole new special interest called basically the middle class, American citizens. And Rules for Radicals in 1971 comes out and says it's important that you hijack the hearts and minds of the middle class. They don't care if you deceive. They don't care if you lie. Just make sure you get the middle class. What's happened to urban communities throughout America? White, black, Hispanic, Asian, doesn't matter. Indian, doesn't matter. They have voted and voted and voted for radicals. And they've used these rules for radicals to get those votes. And then ethics of means and ends. The morality of actions depends on their context and outcomes. Ends often justify the means if the cause is just. That's the scariest thing in here, okay? And that's exactly what we just heard in that clip that we heard that Knight sent me, was that it basically the ends justify the means. And if you're in the way of their just and moral cause, they'll just kill you. They really will. All right, so on that same vein, I want you to listen to Tulsi Gabbard, something that she said on the Laura Ingraham show, where she basically is alluding back to this rules for radicals type approach. And the Democrats are incredible at it, incredible. And basically she's saying they're just playing the same old hand they always do.
You heard the media reaction, and a lot of these same people were just buying lock, stock, and barrel what was sold to them during the 2016 election. But they're essentially saying, this is all old news. This is such a stupid political move on their part. And to that, you say?
They are using the same old tactic that the deep state's propaganda arm in the media uses. Whenever they come across something that is true and that doesn't go along with whatever their narrative is that they're trying to shove down the throats of the American people, they first usually ignore it, as they did when I first released these documents a couple of weeks ago. They tried to ignore it. When they realized that they weren't going to get away with this, that this story was going to continue breathing life, we continued releasing new documents. Then they decided, we'll take this approach of say, this is nothing. There's nothing really to see here. This is bizarre. This is a conspiracy. These are the things that they do over and over and over again. And the next step they will take when they feel that they are not succeeding in getting rid of this truth that we have uncovered for the American people, then they will go down the route of we must destroy and smear and attack the credibility of those who are delivering the truth to the American people. They've done this to President Trump. They've done this to me. They've done this to so many different people, once again, who are trying to tell the American people the truth and expose these people, many of whom you just showed, for who they are as the propaganda arm of the deep state, which would have no power and no influence if they weren't able to feed their lies into a willing spokesperson through the propaganda media.
Mm-hmm. Rules for Radicals Saul Alinsky never thought he'd have the media wrapped up like he does. I mean, so when you have those kind of capabilities, basically it's a heck of a handbook. Tulsi's making the point. They just deny it, right? They go through this whole process, but they have the media to change the narrative, put out whole new stories. And so I thought that was fascinating. So as this relates to the Razor, I have taught the Razor extensively to senior leadership teams that I've worked with because I want them to be really good negotiators. I want them to be able to frame a good argument. I want them to be able to, at bare minimum, tie an opposition, and if at all possible, win. But I've also mentioned it to people in their personal lives. It's just been a great tool for me, and so it is something that I've really never gone to the marketplace with it and said, "Hey, if you want me to come teach the Razor to your senior leadership." I've never done that. I've only used it for myself, but I do feel like I have honored the angel's request to use it for good. And so I want to do something right in the middle here, just for a little levity. I want to let you hear Sam Kinison.
Well, like I said, I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to just do whatever I can for people. Like the World Hunger thing, the USA for Africa. Isn't that great? You guys hear the song? Nice song, isn't it? Beautiful. I'm like anybody else on the planet. I'm very moved by world hunger. I see the same commercials. Those little kids starving and very depressed. And I watch these things on TV and I see those commercials and I look at it and I go, God, how cruel, To see the little kid out there and I go, fine. The film crew could give this kid a sandwich. The kid's not out there, filming a letter from home with a Betamax, huh? There's a director 5 feet away going, don't feed him yet! Get that sandwich out of here! It doesn't work unless he looks hungry! But I'm not trying to make fun of world hunger. Matter of fact, I think I have the answer, because I spent a lot of time working it out. And if you want to stop world hunger, stop sending them food. Don't send these people another bite, folks. You want to send them something? You want to help? Send them U-Hauls. Send them U-Hauls, some luggage, and send them a guy out there that goes, hey, we've been driving out here every day with your food for like the last, 30, 40 years. And we were driving out here a day across the desert, and it occurred to us there wouldn't be world hunger if you people would live where the food is! Understand that? You live in the desert! Nothing grows out here! Nothing's gonna grow out here! You see this? Huh? See this? This is sand. Yeah. It's sand. You know it's going to be 100 years from now, huh? It's going to be sand! Desert! Get your kid shit. We'll make one trip. We'll take you to where the food is. We have deserts in America. We just don't live in them, asshole! You guys been a great crowd. Thank you very much. I love you. Thank you.
Oh, man. I don't know if you guys got to watch him. He was crazy. He was a preacher of some kind, whatever that is, but he was a preacher and then he just went nuts. But I thought that was funny. You say, good Lord, Mel, what's that got to do with anything? Well, it's just the practical nature of what he's saying. There's some truth in there. What we talked about last week, which was really deep. It was really deep. I mean, that actually wore me out to go that deep into something. And I hope it was meaningful and helpful. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, but, it wasn't for me. It was something I felt like I was supposed to talk about. But I will bring it back up on this one premise that being truthful, it starts with not lying to yourself, and then you don't lie to God. And it's fascinating because if you lie to yourself, then you're not going to be able to. You can't work on a root issue if you're lying to yourself, right? And so that was important. So it was just funny to me when that Sam Kinison thing came to mind, and I just went and looked it up and just died laughing because he is making a good point. I mean, they can't grow food there. So I thought that was pretty funny. But anyway, I want to let Victor David Hansen is going to talk for just a second about just kind of the state of the Democrat Party and what they've done to themselves, because they're just so off truth. They're not truthful. The rules for radicals' approach to things, when it's attached to complete lunacy in terms of the positions that you take, that are just you just can't validate some of the things they stand for. But he's a very eloquent, smart man. So let's hear what he has to say.
Donald Trump's greatest legacy, he broke the Democratic Party. And he exposed it for what it was. It was a bi-coastal elite party with a bunch of billionaires who spend lavishly and a bunch of subsidized poor and a professional class that feels frustrated. They make $200,000 and $300,000 a year, but they live in these blue cities that are very expensive and they can't buy their beautiful home. That's what the Mondami constituency is. Frustrated young white professionals. And then they've lost the working class. It's not just they have lost the muscular classes, Hispanic muscular classes, black males, white. As I said before, if you look at 2016, 20, and 24, Donald Trump's white vote, it's pretty constant. And he did not win the popular vote in 2016 or 2020. And his voting, and yet he did win the popular vote and the Electoral College in 2024 with the same percentage and actual numbers of white voters. So what happened? He picked up some women, he picked up some young people, and he got 55% of Hispanic males, and he got about 25% of black males, and he picked up another 10 to 15% of Asian males. And how could that be if he was supposed to be a racist according to the Democrats? It happened because they don't it's not that they're just people. They don't want to be talked to. Nobody wants to be talked to. And basically, this is a caricature, but the Democratic attitude toward a black truck driver or a Mexican-American electrician was something like this. Now, you don't know what's good for you, but those 10,000 people crossing the border every year every day, and the 2 to 3 million people that cross every year illegally in the Rio Grande Valley, they're going to be good for you. I don't care what you say about your schools being swamps, crime going up. They're good for you. Remember that. Now, men have a right to transition, and they are now women, and they're going to compete in your daughter's sports, and you don't know what's good for you because you're too ignorant. But I will represent you. I'm a black woman with a PhD. I'm a Hispanic woman that's your congresswoman. I am your white liberal Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi, and I will tell you what is good for you. Got it? And then they'll say, you know what? You don't understand that gas at $5.50 a gallon is really good for you because the planet is heating up. And the new Green Deal is going to save you. Get some solar panels and get on the team. So they talk down sanctimoniously, and that was never clearer when Barack Obama confronted those black Democratic activist young men and said, basically, you don't know what you're doing. You think Donald Trump's good or something. You've got to get out there and support Harris. You're suffering basically from Marxist false consciousness. And as an elite, know what's good for you. And I will tell you, now go do it. That's what he basically said to them. For me, the locus classicus, the epitome of this is Pete Buttigieg. Everything about him represents what I just said. Sanctimonious, self-righteous, talk down. I know the answers. I know what's good for you. I am the transportation secretary. I don't think California is suffering from not enough freeways or it's too crowded. It's suffering from racist legacies of clover leaves. And I'm going to make non-racist clover. Nobody wants that. And that's what the Democratic Party, it's a Karen scold.
A Karen scold is what he said at the end. I faded it too fast. They said the Democrat Party is a Karen scold. Interesting. I always thought, but I just didn't understand how in the world anybody would put Buttigieg in charge of anything. I mean, he's just not a capable person. He's a talker. But Victor Davis Hansen is one of those guys that he says it so well, you don't really need me to re-say it. I thought that was fascinating, though. And in light of what we've been talking about, though, with limited government, the Reagan, kind of the Reagan model of what he wanted to try to do, the Reagan coalition he put together, the Reagan Democrats that voted for him. And then you see all that kind of getting resurrected in what Trump's been able to do. Vastly different people, but very similar in what they're trying to do. I think Trump's probably one of the most capable people on the planet. I mean, thank goodness he's on our side. And when I say ours, I mean the side of good and God, because he's just exceedingly capable and he works really hard. And a lot of the things that you were told when you were a little son, get up early and work hard and try to do good every day. And I'm like, well, Trump does that, and he does it probably better than anybody else on the planet. And so I will say this on the Putin meeting. It fascinates me that we have so many people in our media, so many people in the deep state, so many people that are Republicans and Democrats, and so many people in power around the world that they just want the United States and Russia at odds with each other. They just want that boogeyman out there. And one of the things that really hurt Putin, and look, Putin's KGB. I don't know him. I know he's a really probably bad guy. He's probably done some really bad things. But if you're a world leader and your options are be at war with the second most powerful nuclear force on the planet, and he's also a bad guy, he'll do bad things to you, or have peace, you might want to try the peace route if it's possible. So blessed are the peacemakers doesn't mean unless you really want to go to war, then that's fine. It's like, is there a way to find peace? At the same time, the whole scorpion frog thing and trying to not, have people on the other side of the rope. If he's going to draw you into a battle, well, then if you don't put down your gun, you blow him away. So it's hard for people sometimes to realize all this can be true at the same time. But one of the main things, and I'll get into this in another episode, but one of the main things Putin wanted was to be treated with some respect as the leader of what he sees as the Russian Empire, which is a very vast and noble empire of the world age. So he looks at what was Russia. If it ever was Russia, he wants it back. Right or wrong, I'm just saying, that's what he wants. He loves Mother Russia. He's a nationalist for Russia. And we, as the American leaders, after Reagan didn't with Gorbachev, but all those that followed kept moving the football. And we all don't encroach upon Russian territory with NATO. Well, we did. And when we do that, that's, if you know him, you know that, okay, he's not going to be able to take that. That's like that dog that if you say a certain thing or do a certain thing, that that dog's going to react a certain way. So my hope is that cooler heads prevail with Trump and Putin, and regardless of characters and personalities and morality or anything else, just being able to get peace in our time, and hope that a Russian leader comes along that's possibly more trustworthy. But no sense in being at war with this one. But I won't go in any more of that. But this is really an interesting clip. This is Joel Brooks at the Redeemer Church here in Avondale area in Birmingham. And I recorded this. Hope it's okay. I recorded off his YouTube sermon last Sunday. It was fantastic. So a week ago. And he's speaking about in Isaiah, and this is about business too. This is about everything. This is about who God is with us, okay? But in Isaiah, God goes on and on and on. He's in chapter 40, and he's been doing that. He's been going through Ezekiel and Isaiah. He's in the 40s now. And it's like God goes off on a pretty good tangent there through Isaiah about all the mighty things that he's done. And this is fascinating. So check this out.
Isaiah 40:25. We already mentioned the first part of this. To whom will you compare me? Or who is my equal? Says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all of these? He who brings out the starry host, one by one, and calls them by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. You guys have heard that there's more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on all the beaches in all the world. If you haven't, flash news right there. It's true. I think Carl Sagan is the one who said that. It's astonishing. I hate the beach. I hate that it's flat. I hate that it's hot. I mostly hate the sand. The only redeeming thing about it is I can actually scoop up and I'm reminded. Stars. On all the beaches in all the worlds. But that information is actually not correct, or as correct as it could be. That info is based on what we knew many years ago. over there being a little over 1 million galaxies, each having perhaps 1 billion stars. Now we know, due to Hubble and the James Webb Telescope, there are well over 2 trillion galaxies. That means we can conservatively say there are more stars in the heaven than if you were to multiply all the grains of sand on all the beaches in the world by 10,000. And 10,000 more times than grains of sand in all the world. That's how many stars there are. And so God says, you want to know what? I call all of them forth. They're all in the place that they should be. I've actually called them by name. Does God tell us that? Because he wants us on our knees, beholding him as glorious. That's why he tells us that. Can I tell you, you are never filled with more joy than when you're beholding glory. Your most happiest, your most joyful moments you have ever had in your life is when you're not thinking of yourself at all. You're actually caught up in the glory of another. Maybe it's the glory of an event, or the glory of the majesty of mountains, or the glory of looking at the universe. When you're caught up in the glory of another, not thinking of yourself at all, that is when you're most joyful. Just beholding it. You're created for that. The more glorious the thing is, the more joy we have beholding it. In Isaiah, he's just been giving us things to just bask in the glory of God about. But here's the kicker, and this is where Isaiah's been driving us to all along. He's been building to this crescendo happening in the last chapters here in the 40s. He says this, as incomprehensibly glorious as God is by calling out every star by name, the climax of God's glory is not him naming the stars. The climax of his glory is him saving sinners through grace.
Wow. Is that good or what? So I that really touched me. I don't know that I have ever really gotten my head around that. Not the number of stars, but just, God wants to be glorified. And I think that irritated Satan. And I think it irritates the anti-Christ or the anti-God people out there. I think that's where you can go sideways quick. And that's a truthful moment between you and God, is that, yeah, I accept that you're glorious and amazing and I should spend some time worshiping and praising you, or we just approaching God when we need stuff, So I thought that was fascinating. But in a world where, can you imagine just there are 2 trillion stars? And so I did look into that, and that's true. There's going to be more than that. I remember when I was between 2 and 3, my mom told this story, and she would laugh, but she said, you were sitting there, we were just walking around outside looking up at the stars, and just out of the blue, you just said, Mommy, if you put a wall up in space, what's on the other side of the wall? And I was, and she just looked at me. I don't remember it. I was too little, but she just looked, she said, oh Lord, what kind of child are you? But at an early age, even for me, it was pretty obvious that it goes on forever. Like, seriously, if you put a wall up in space, what's on the other side? So if we have, the James Webb Telescope, Hubble, that can see out far enough to estimate 2 trillion galaxies, what do you think's on the other side? It's not like there's an end or a wall. Because that's how glorious God is. And so for God to be able to do all that, and he could name, he put every star where it goes, and he named every one of them, and he keeps up with them. And then he cares about me. He cares about me, that I have to go to Charlotte, North Carolina, to debate a badass, brilliant Harvard debate team champion or captain, wrestling champion, and helped me go up there and gave me some insights and technologies to earn the man's respect, and then and ask me to use that to help people now. And I have. And and like I say, and it's fascinating too about the angel is that as the more I think about it, he looked like my my Granddaddy Red when he was younger. And so in spirit of Granddaddy Red on the way out, I want to listen to Jerry Clower. And I know many of you have heard him, but many of the young generation hadn't. But so this guy was so funny, and we'll take him on the way out.
Got a phone call from my brother Sonny the other day, and he said, Jerry, the Ledbetters have a burden. Well, now the Bible says to bear ye one another's burdens. And that got my attention. I got in my new pickup truck and drove to South Mississippi to visit with the Ledbetters, Uncle Versi and Aunt Pet. And the 11 young'uns, Ardale, Burnell, Raynell, W.L., Linnell, Odell, Udale, Marcel, Claude, Eugene, and Clovis. Whew, 11 of them. And when I drove up in the front yard, Aunt Pet Ledbetter was sitting on the front porch shelling butter beans. Yankees call butter beans baby llamas. Aunt Pet Ledbetter saw me. She commenced to crying. I said, what's the matter? She said, Jerry, they got Versi down there at the courthouse and he's on trial. I said, I'll go down and whoop every lawyer in that town with my fist. Versi Ledbetter ain't never done nothing to be tried over. She said, that's why I sent for you. Go straighten it out. I scratched off, went down there, jumped out of my truck, and one of them lawyers said, Jerry, we know you're very fond of Mr. Ledbetter, but we have 2 adult witnesses that saw him have a wreck 6 weeks ago. They rushed to the scene of the wreck and said, oh, sir, let us help you. And he said, I ain't hurt, gonna leave me alone. And now he's wanting to sue an insurance company because they won't pay for putting a cast on a broke leg that he claims got broke in the wreck, where he said he wasn't hurt. I said, I got to hear Uncle Versi's side of it. I don't believe that lawyer. Got a hairdo, look like a milking machine's been sucking on it. I want to hear what Uncle Versi says. Uncle Versi took the witness stand, and one of them smart aleck lawyers said, Mr. Ledbetter, will you please face the jury and tell the jury why at the scene of the wreck you said you wasn't hurt, and now you claim to have a broke leg. Uncle Versi said, it ain't no big deal. I didn't mean to bother nobody. I had a hog ready for market. I put my hog in my little old truck, and I'm driving the truck to town to sell the hog. I get halfway to town, and I meet one of them double-decker cow trucks loaded down with cows. And a trailer of that tractor truck sideswiped me, run me down a big, deep ditch. Them slobbering, bleeding, broke-up, bellering cows come down on me, demolished my pickup, broke my leg, and I thought I was going to be killed. And about that time, up drove the highway patrol with the state trooper. Walked up to the edge of that deep ditch and moved his coat off of a .357 Magnum pistol. Whooped that pistol out and thumb-cocked it and asked the truck driver, said, driver, what's wrong with that cow right down there? Said, she's got a broke leg. Boom! Blowed her brains out. Said, what's wrong with this cow right over here? Said, she's got a broke leg. Boom! Uh-oh. Shot her right between the eyes, killed her, graveyard dead. He tilted that pistol and the smoke commenced coming out of the barrel, and he said, oh, sir, what's wrong with you? And I said, not a thing in the world.
Jerry Clower. Go watch some of his old stuff, man. He's really good. Well, look, I hope you've enjoyed the Mel Blackwell Experience this week. We'll be back same time next week. Till then, cheers.